Hey everyone, this is Sandman from Downrange Rock Helms. I just finished a video. I went around my shop a little bit and talked briefly about this saw. I'm going to start with this one. I know everybody, a lot of folks use a tile saw. My partner did for quite a while. He rolled up on a couple of new machines. And the problem with tile saws, they're very handy to use in trim saws. I'm going to show you down here. I've got one right here, a little 6-inch, and I use that for trimming off junk, doing the small stuff that I don't want to take the time to put in this other machine. But it's all freehand too. So the problem with freehand is that it may not be a very good cut. When you're doing jewelry or something like that, it's super important that you have something that's consistent. So here we are back at this fit machine. It's the first machine I rolled up on, probably from the 40s and 50s. Not sure exactly. It works off of weights. I've done some things on it, because there's no, two things that they've, I added a little light here, which makes it really nice. It's a light right down the product. And then we have this leather patch up here that sits on there. It's supposed to keep the sprays, but the reality is it does about a 70% job. And the rest of it is that you get this, the saw blade coming into the side of the rock at different angles. If anybody's got a machine like this, you know what I'm talking about. It can spray oil anywhere. So you could have oil in this whole area. And oil's not cheap. I have a space here that no one's going to scream at me if it gets oily or dirty, but most folks are doing this in their garage or another space, and the other person in the house might have issues with that. So just a really quick down and dirty. This works off a pulley system, works off of weights, and so the most thing that you got to remember about this particular saw is, or a saw like this, is that you have to do some cutting, before to learn the machine. So I don't know what the make and model is. I was thinking it could be a lower tone, but it maybe from the 40s and 50s. There's nothing on the old, and that original motor, man, still going. I think the only thing I've ever had to do, and since I've been cutting with it, was for several years now, is I've had to replace the belt just because I thought it looked kind of weather cracked. So a little latch here in the back, and it basically through weight feeds the material into the saw. There's a stop back here in the back. I'll show you that you can adjust. That allows it to stop it before it slams all the way to the end. Anyway, so let's get this going here. I use this for my medium to small stuff. I have cut quite a few Thunder Eggs in here, but anything over about 4 inches, in the 4 inches and under is fine. Problem with the Thunder Egg, and I have a couple different devices. Let's see if I can find one of them. Oops. Find one of them here. Anyway, I have a pair of grabbers that it grabs the, there it is. This is a medium grabber. Pretty slick idea, fits in your thing. Grabs the Thunder Egg like this and allows you to cut it. You got to be mindful of a few things when you're using that. Like, you don't want to cut the metal with it because your diamond blade will definitely cut this up. So this is something I've used quite a bit. The system here works pretty well. But usually with anything, I say 4 or bigger, or 5 for sure, is definitely something I use my big saw for, which we'll get to here in a minute. So, like I was saying in the last video, the problem with saw videos is the industry does, walks you through stuff, the basics and how all that stuff works. But there's nobody talking, so at least been my experience. And the problem with that is it's hard to learn just by looking, especially if you don't have any prior knowledge. So, call this Rock Saw 101. So, I got a piece of, I can see if I can get it up here. Ain't gonna get a good video unless you do something like this. Hard to say. Come on, get into focus. Yeah, so that is a piece of graveyard plume. It's from Plume Seam. That particular piece is pretty cool, very pretty when we cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set this up in the saw. I'm going to make that first cut, the butt cut. It already had a butt cut, or it broke on a butt lines there, so it's not going to have around it. It's going to be fairly flat. So something I actually can use. But I'll cut the piece of it off, and then I'll cut another piece and see what it looks like. But, so let's see if you can, yeah, you can see it. Okay, you got this guide right here. You got this device. I use a screwdriver. Basically allows you to go in and out. You got this over here. It allows you to open the carriage this way. And then you have a tightener here with the same kind of device. So the idea is I like to get, so there's about 1/8 of an inch space there. One thing you got to know about these things, I think more than anything, is that it takes a little bit to try to figure out the weight. I can usually tell by the sound. Hearing's not the great after too many explosions, but I do know the difference in the sounds. Low frequency, I can hear low frequency just fine. So what happens is I can tell by the sound how fast it's going, whether I should lighten the load or put a little bit more on it. So we're just gonna sit this piece in here. Like, remember, this is all moving. So typically what I do is I try to capture it in there with enough material hanging out past. I'll move the camera over here in a minute after. And then I set this thing. You see, this is very hands-on. There's a lot. And then this is the first cut, so it doesn't have to be perfect. What I do is I leave enough material sticking out, and I'll show you here in just a second, that I can make several cuts. Now, the struggles are, after you make those several cuts, what happens? Let me get my rag here. So you can see that it's hanging out. It's going to be well past the blade. See, I got plenty of room to move it. Once you get down to that place where it's right here, because this thing doesn't allow you. So the interesting footnote on this one is I always check on the first cut, and I know this one's going to be fine. So I let it run past the blade, because here's the issue you have. As you can cut fairly close, it'll cut right up, almost up against this guide stock here. The problem is this nut, it starts to go in this space right here, and if the nuts, it doesn't work. It'll start to bang, and so there's a standoff. It doesn't allow you to get as close as you like to get. So you got to be mindful of that. If you plan on making lots of cuts on this thing, then set it up so you get lots of cuts. You know, you get it in there, you want to get it flat. Normally, some people would like long pieces, but I'm making cabs out of this, so short pieces actually work a lot better for me. So get it down there. I'm trying to do this to the screen. I do this left-handed too. Tighten it up. So this is set, this and this, and now I'm going to set the side. So I'm going to need both hands for that. So I'll put it back over here. Now I'll show you. I want the saw blade to cut that first cut, and then I just tighten this up. I want that saw blade, as you can see, it's going to cut all the way down, so it takes this whole line all the way. So this first piece is going to be misshapen, but I want to save as much as possible for making cabs out of, so I take it off the least amount as I can. And I put that over into my ends pile, and if it's pretty enough, I'll do something with it, and if it's not, I pass it on to somebody else, or if I get too much, usually what happens, I just get too many pieces, I pass it along to somebody else for a couple of bucks, a whole bag full of those things, and they're great for just doing small cab work. So the next thing I would do is I put this down. And this is so we don't have oil spraying everywhere. And actually this garbage bag, I've had it for about 1.5 years now, so I figured I got my money's worth out of it. Other things I have around here, I have this little cup. It's usually where I put the items when they first come out of there, so they can drip a little bit. Because I'm about capturing as much of the runoff as I can. And in this particular station, I have a place over here. You can see there's a couple items in there. I cut those the other day with my big saw. And they'll go from here, once they're drained off. There's little ribs in the bottom of that thing, and so it allows them the oil to stand off. I'll take those into my washroom, give them a bath, and bring them out here with the bull wheel, and along with the other pieces. You know, the table gets full, I do a run on them. That's what I did this morning. I did a run on stuff. I had a bunch of stuff. So, all right, so I'll set it up for you. But basically, I know this is going to be hard. So this is released, so it's up against the product. When I first start this thing up, it'll start to make a groove. It's fairly 90 degrees to that surface, and as long as it's 90 degrees, it won't chase the roll. In other words, if we were using it on a slope piece like this, and it's coming in, it might catch this roll and run this roll. So we don't want to run the roll. Excuse me. We want it to get a groove started so that it keeps the saw blade moving as evenly as possible. Like I said, this works off of weights. The big one I'm going to show you next works off of a worm drive, and it goes at a speed. I set the speed by how I put the belts on there. All right, so I'll fire this up with only this weight on there, and then I'll start adding. I add these weights. Sometimes I've got some really hard agate that I'm cutting in through. I have this other piece here, which is basically what's left of an old grinding stone. And then I have these two. So I can do all kinds of different weight combinations. One or two of these and one of those, or two of those. Or I put it until I get it going the speed I want. This is a fairly small piece. This should go fairly quickly. And I shouldn't be using any more than probably just one of these weights right here. So I'm going to turn this off for a second because you don't want to hear this thing. It makes noise. And I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. All right, we're back. So I did a butt cut, which is the first cut, or squaring cut. And then I did the butt cut, first cut, and finish cut, or first slab cut. So let me get this moved over a little closer. I was kind of surprised by the time I got to the third one. We'll utilize this light here. So this was the butt cut. Like I said, this is Graveyard Point. See if I can... I don't want it to do that. Oh, shoot. Come on, focus. So this is a real pretty piece. You can see the white coming up. Come on, stay in focus. There we go. It's got a kind of a greeny gray, and then there's also some black in it too, which started showing up. That was the first. This was the what they call the first cut. That's the cut right after. Come on, focus in. There you go. Both sides. Come on. Really hard to see with the camera as far as the depth. But you'd be surprised. Sometimes you're cutting long and the first couple of pieces is not exactly what you're thinking they're going to be. It's really hard to see in this light. Come on, stay focused. That white, right dead center right there, there's a white stave coming up. There's a little bit better with me turning it. Highlighted by black, which is going to be really fantastic when I get this. Let me see if I can do this like this. There we go. So, very pretty. See how the white's wrapped? So anyway, that's Graveyard Point. You can see that little line there on the bottom left-hand side of that cab. That's a pretty typical thing with this particular machine, unfortunately. We try to minimize it, but I kind of sped the process up. Now that was about 25 to 30 minutes to cut those three. So each time, and I was standing here. No, most of the time I don't stand here. Most of the time I get this machine up, I get my settings, my stop so it doesn't slam, and then I walk off and go do something else. And so I hear it when it's done. But so this is my 12-inch trim. All right, let's move over here to the big boy here. Let's see if we can see that pretty good. Okay, this is a 24-inch Covington. Trying to get something from my hands. That one over there, the little guy, is notorious for oiling your hands up. This one's not quite as bad. So the difference in this one is you got 24-inch blade. What does that mean? Well, that means that it cut a piece that's 12 inches thick and 24 inches long. And you might be able to squeeze another inch or two because the blade doesn't go all the way to the back. But basically this carriage moves along and there's ways to adjust it. This is one thing. You pinch those together and you can slide this carriage back and forth. You pinch this together and you can slide the vise that holds your products. Now, this will hold a pretty good sized piece with this in here, but this particular piece in here helps circumvent this so you're not necessarily using it as a back wall. So you can take this out, 2 nuts, this thing comes out, and then this is your guide, so you can put a pretty darn good piece in here. I've done some cheats on the side. Okay, so those are the settings. So here you got, inside here, you got a big wheel that goes down to the drive motor. And then you've got that adjustable fly there that's on a spring down there on the bottom that moves, that little one right down there. This one here has, looks like about a 6. And then it's got this double here. So basically how this goes is 2, 3, 4 for the smallest one on there, 5 where it's, and 6 where it's at now. And that's how I have it. There's not the wheel size. This is probably like, you know, an inch and a bit. This is a little bit bigger. Anyway, the progressively, and what that has to do with, there's 2 things going on here. This here has to do with the speed of the saw. That back there has to goes back to the worm drive motor. So back here, you'll see this, boy, banging into everything here. See that piece of all thread that goes all the way through to this tightening guide here. Basically what this thing does is as it's spinning along, depending on where I have the belts at as to how fast it moves. Get her back over here. 2.6, so in other words, this guy and where it's at now on the big wheel, we do that again where you can see this guy, the little guy, is the slowest. And I mean, that might take, on a 6-inch piece, that could take 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, it goes really, really slow. And it's meant that way when using hard product or using something hard. So anyway, you can adjust this thing. It pulls that little tensioner down the bottom, tensioner wheel. But right now, I think I've got it set, I got it set 3.6, so I've got it set for what I call Thunder Eggs, which is my good medium of the road. Moves fairly quickly, still doesn't move terribly fast. So this particular blade is what they call a splintered blade. It's got grooves in it. It's a very aggressive blade. Not a cheap blade. I think that blade was $900 and something. So yes, it takes a long time to go through a blade. But if you get a cheap blade, it'll go through it really fast. So I got this one because it's a lot more, there's a more of relief, and it seems to go through pretty fast. It's pretty thick cut. You know, you're talking about an eighth or probably 3/16 of an inch, as opposed to this guy over here on the 12. You know, I go with a thin kerf, and this is another reason why I can't force it through here, because this blade moves, see? And if it starts going through too fast, it'll start guiding over. And you don't want that. You want nice, even cuts, because when you go to do your cabs, it makes it a lot easier to set them and to make the piece look nice. So anyway, there's not much to this. Like I said, they've pretty much taken they made a dummy free. So like I said, you squeeze this, let me see if you can see that now. Yeah. You squeeze this handle, this allows you to slide this whole carriage. You squeeze this handle, and allows you to slide this back and forth. Boy, normally I have to keep it a little cleaner. I'm cutting a lot of Thunder Eggs. The problem with Thunder Eggs is they shed. So what I have is I grab some pieces to kind of give you an idea. And there's a reason why I grabbed these pieces. So this right here is a typical Pride A Thunder Egg to be found over there in the Madras, Oregon area. Very well known. Bed's been around from forever. The Richardsons took control of it or bought it in 1976 and closed the Pony Butte access, which is the way you used to get into it. Now you go through their ranch. And about, I think it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago, you used to be able to go dig these. In other words, you go in there and they had a minimum fee or whatever. And I think you had a minimum of 10 pounds. But basically you were paying like, I'm trying to think, I think my dad said he paid like 75 cents a pound. And I think it's up to $2. But anyway, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they shut the beds down. So now the general public can't go buy them. But you can still go to their ranch, which is east of Madras. And there's directions. There's about 11 miles east of Madras. And you can go in there. And they use heavy machinery, and they've got several beds there. I mean, I could sit here and name them off, but there's a bunch of beds, and they remove them and then bring them there. So they don't charge anything more than they did when you were digging them yourself, but they've kind of taken away the fun of doing that. Maybe they'll open that back up again someday. Haven't been there yet this year, so that's Friday Thunder Egg, and I'll explain why I chose these, because it's just kind of a random pattern here. So it's a little bit boogered in a few spots, but that's pretty typical. So this is another Friday egg that's looks like he's one with about 4 attachments. It's pretty not untypical. So the important thing about these things is to know how they lay in the bed. If you know how they lay in the bed, then you know how to cut them. So one thing you got to realize about thunder eggs is no matter what you do, they're not always perfect, and so sometimes they'll only fit in one way, even though I know it's not going to cut the way I want it to cut. They lay in a bed, like I said, like this one here. I can tell by looking at it. I've cut plenty of these things. It laid in the bed like that. So that means that the gravity is going to bring the material in, and the lines are going to be running this way. Let me get it up there where you can see it. This way. You can see how it's kind of flat on one end, how it looks like it's squished. So that's how it was laying in the bed, as I've dug a bunch of them. So that being said, if you can get this in the saw however you want to do it, you could cut this one this way, you could cut it this way, you could cut it on a quarter, you could quarter saw it. There's no indication. There's a little agate trace on the outside edge here. Oh, geez, I'm gonna get this up. Camera's a little higher than I thought it was. There's an agate trace along the edge of these mold lines, and sometimes you'll see opalite and a few other things come through. There's just a slight agate trace, so I'm not really sure exactly what this is going to look like, so it'll be a big surprise. This one here, I can see agate coming, busting out through that little spot there, which means that probably most of these little guys are going to have something in them. Let me go back to it. Come on, focus in, fool. There we go. Right there. So might be a trace. Been looking out, there might be a little opalization trace. The nice thing about that is it might have some white mixed in with the color. And the beds, I can usually tell by looking at the eggs. Let me grab one, I'll show you. So this is another one of their beds. This is from their moss bed. See how green it is? Pretty typical. Can't really see it in there, but there's water line, and usually this is where they get a lot of moss. So anyway, those eggs are pretty distinguishable. They have a flat bed that's pretty distinguishable. But other than that, the blue bed, the red bed, the pony bed, butte bed, and the Betty bed, and the plume bed, pretty much the eggs all look the same. And so, to be honest with you, I've seen enough cut. We used to cut, I had a whole bunch of them that I got from the blue bed one time, and they were absolutely gorgeous, just stunning colors, lots of stuff going on the inside. And then, you know, the next year, as it moved on, it changed. So that's how it is. So just because you got a bunch of really cool ones from a particular bed doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, because the bed moves, people remove material from it. So here's another type. This is from the Sucker Creek area. I can see trace coming through it. Sucker Creek doesn't have this spectacular mix of stuff. Usually it's an agate. They get opalization in white, grays, browns, and blues. But I'm going to get a watermark in there. It's hard to say. So this is just, the thing about this is I know there's a flat spot on that one side right here. So I know that was sitting in the bed like that. But the reality is these guys are a lot different. The material that they grow in is a lot different. They're not in a perlite base like the Richardsons are. They're in more of a volcanic, highly siliconized rhyolite. And this does kind of a crumbly rhyolite, and you know, rhyolite itself is pretty hard. So anyway, so I got those three. Then I'm going to do something. I kind of told a fib. I told you guys when I went down to pick up that equipment, my first video, that I was going to try to get out to get some petrified wood, and I was going to try to get out to the beach. Well, we had a couple of great days, but I couldn't get together with my rock buddy. I mean, beautiful, nice and warm, really not typical for that time of Oregon. And by the time we got ready to go, it rained, and it rained for like 5 days in a row. So we did not make it up to the wood bed. Going back in a couple of weeks, I might try to see if we can get up there. Probably a muddy, nasty mess, but if I can get in there, I'll do a video. I did make an attempt to go to the beach. The problem was the tides were all messed up. It was a full moon, big tides, and so the difference between the high and low tides was 5 feet. So we were running and grabbing and running. But I did find this really nice piece of agatized jasper. And I'm really, it looks like there might be some reds, some yellows, some browns, and definitely some white agate. So I am really excited about cutting into this. It looked a little mossy, but it's hard to say. But I got that on the list to cut. And then I might do this. I haven't quite decided. This is something I got a hold of when I went down there. Part of my procurement, and a bigger piece than this, but we decided that neither one of our saws could probably handle the size, so we did the unthinkable and broke this off. But this is moss. This is Maury Mountain moss, and this is probably a really old one. It came from an old site, or from an old collector. So reds and oranges and greens. So this is going to make for some very, very pretty cabs. And what makes the moss agate is not the density of it, it's when there's a lot of agate mixed in with it, because then you have some clarity that separates the moss. Big difference between moss and plume is plume has a tendency to kind of be by itself and grow. Moss kind of looks like moss. It just grows really thick, and it's hard to delineate. It makes for pretty stuff. But if you get a little agate in there, it tends to be a little harder, which means it polishes a lot better. And you'll be able to see the moss a lot easier. All right, so that was not smart. Move out. So first up on the block, Mr. Strange Agate, or Mr. Strange Thunder Egg. And I want to cut this down this line here. Let me just make sure I got that in the video screen. Down this line here. It'll cut the most amount of egg. It'll cut the big portion of the egg and as many of the attachments. So with this, there we go. All right. So I want to cut this about as in half as I can get it, because the blade won't go any. Let's see. Yeah, blade's not going to go over any farther than that. So this is the conundrum you run into sometimes. You get it exactly where you want it, and it's not going to be perfectly cut in half. One piece might be because there's a fractured spot on that one end down there where it came out, is what they call capping, when these things sit in moist perlite, and so they're soft when they come out of the ground sometimes, and if they have a fracture in them, because they've been moved, you know, for years and years and years, they're just moving like this as they're developing, and as they move, sometimes that, with them being in that moist soil, that they'll crack. So basically, I start by moving the guide over as far as I can, And then there's numbers on this guide, and I'll bring it over here and show you what I mean. So that's going to be about the best I can get. So, because it won't go in the saw any other way. So turn this handle, and this wood there's wood here for a reason. It helps dig into the rock. It collapses, so I'm making sure it's tight. Because so here's the thing about saws: if you don't have stuff in there tight enough, and the vibration from the, even if the saw itself doesn't do it, the vibration from the saw, the motor moving back there and everything else, could knock your product loose. And if it moves at all, it could jam in and jam your blade. I've had that happen to ones on my 12-inch blade before and bend a blade. And there goes $60 to $75 just like that. You know. So you don't want to do that. So just be mindful, take a couple extra seconds, make sure she's nice and tight. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this one down here, and I'll bring it up to the product is almost just barely touching. Too tight. Okay, so here's what I want to show you. Now it doesn't really matter with Thunder Eggs, but see the numbers on top? This thing here takes this whole system right here and moves it back and forth on here. So like if you're cutting, I'll show you when we get to the bigger pieces why it's important. And I've come to the figure that 6 turns on this thing. So in this case, when we get ready to do it, I'll show you it again. But basically, we've done 4. I'm going to go around. If that 4 passes around 6 times, that's about the right amount. That's a strong quarter. Strong quarter is nice. Sometimes when you're doing petrified wood and you're doing display pieces, you could even do it where you cut it. You want them really thick, especially if it's a really, really big piece of log, because you get them too thin and they get brittle and pieces can break off. You keep it nice thick. So this allow you to cut whatever thickness. Since we're just cutting this sucker in half, that's all we're doing. So we don't need to worry about that. So that's up here next to the blade. It's in here nice and tight. Break that thing loose, lower this thing down. And all I do is pull out on the handle. Now, the nice thing about this machine, as opposed to the 12-inch machine, is the 12-inch machine doesn't have a stop. So if I walk away from that thing and I get to talking with someone or whatever, when it cuts through the material, it'll keep running. So sometimes the slab will fall off and get pinned down there, and you'll get a bunch of additional cuts on your slab, which is not good. So, but this guy here, if I did this thing and decided to go have lunch and come back in 3 hours, it will have turned itself off, because as the carriage goes far enough back there towards the back, it hits a stop, pulls the electricity out and shuts it off. So, and I have done that before. I got busy and not paid attention. Oh crap! I've got something in the saw that there's no problem, because the product will fall down here. This thing will stay in the vise, and that'll go back there until it shuts itself off. But you don't want to saw it for like 3 hours if you don't need to. So anyway, let's go ahead and fire this up. That'll probably take about 8 to 10 minutes, and we'll see what happens. Okay, everyone, we are back. It's took a little while, actually, a lot longer than I thought. Let me pull this last pieces out of here. I'm cutting off the small edge of this thing. This is the, I went ahead and cut all 3 Thunder Eggs, and went ahead and cut that Jasper piece that I found, the yellow one. And this is now starting to cut into the piece of Maury Mountain Moss agate. And we'll take a quick look at these here in a minute. I just wanted to show you something about this. I told you I'd show you about that. That's gonna be pretty material. It's a little fractured up. Part of that was we probably did that when we tried to take it off the car-sized piece of rock that was on. Both looked at it and we thought, Anyway, So back down to this little dial here. You're down here where you can, where am I at here? All right, here we go. So I'm a little bit off kilter, but basically that 4 is sitting straight up in the air. So I'm, going counterclockwise towards me. It's a lot different when you got something else. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well, we're getting towards the end of it. So anyway, it's going to take a piece that's probably pretty close to, let me get that to focus in, about 1/4 inch, 3/16 of an inch. All right, so let's take a quick peek at this stuff. So just remember, no matter what kind of saw you're using, a lot of it takes a little bit of time. And I can kind of blast through it a little bit, you know. Literally started this yesterday, but you know, as it is, Murphy right away for whatever reason I had to fix the switch on my saw. Right after I turned the camera off and start the saw up, it didn't start. So it was, anyway, easy fix, just bad timing. So let's take a look at this first Thunder Egg. Now remember, this is the one, these are, interesting, I must have lost a piece of it in there. Must have lost a few pieces of it. Hold on here. The wrong one. No. All right. So let me see if we can see this. This is not going to be good lighting. That's just all there is to it. Move over here a little closer. We can change the angle of the camera. Hold on. Bear with me. A lighter background on it. All right. That's prettier. That's better. All right. So here's that one that was multi. Like I said, I cut it because I wanted to intersect as many of these other little Thunder Eggs. So little bitty Thunder Eggs, a couple of them, they do have a little bit of stuff in them. But very interesting, kind of wispy, cloudy, with, it's like a little quartz pocket, and it's solid. So what happens a lot of times with these is they'll not quite form, that quartz starts to form, and then it'll double flow and flow back in there. So you have a quartz pocket that's been filled in with clear agate, and so it's beautiful. It's like you can see the quartz, and you should be able to touch the quartz, but you can't. So that is actually a little geo pocket in there, and I imagine once I get that cleaned up, it might even sparkle. And here's the other half. All right, so that was the first one. Like I said, the second one, I think I did both the Richardsons in a row. Like I said, it's an interesting thing. You can do these right next to each other and have a completely different outcome. Okay, so you got watermark on here, and then there's that, what I was talking about as far as that crystal pocket. So believe it or not, you know, there's just the very, very center is still a geode. But anyway, so pretty. These are, so yeah, the biggest thing about, biggest unfortunate thing about Richardsons now is that they can tell you they're getting them at the bed. They can tell you which bed they're coming out of. But I have a tendency to know, they'll get us stuff over there that I know where the good spots are and where the not so good spots are. And they're just digging. And so the reality is, sometimes being able to decide, digging in certain areas, we've been very fortunate about getting a certain type of color or mix, and pretty true to form, but it's a little bit different when someone else is doing the digging for it, and you're just kind of like, you know, randomly looking at something like this and trying to figure out, how do I want to cut that, and what is it going to show on the inside? All right, so this here is a Lucky Strike egg, and this is must be old stock. because you certainly don't see that much anymore. That coloration. There's a little bit of like this wispy cloud. There's a little bit of moss up here, and then there's these kind of growing. It's hard to say if it's moss or plume or tube agate because you get both of those. It looks more like it's plumy. You know. Anyway, be interesting. It'll be a little bit different when we get it polished up. And there's a little pocket right there. If I was moved a little bit farther over, I would open it up. There's just a tiny little quartz pocket right there. All right. So that was number 3. So all 3 center eggs. You know, I said those are just random, pretty cool randoms. All right. So not a whole bunch disappointed with the yellow stuff, but a little bit, I guess. Wasn't as hard as I thought. In fact, the first piece came off in crumbles. Just very, hold on here, it's starting to fall apart still. That happens on occasions. You know, jasper is pretty hard usually, and agate is very hard as well. They're both same family, same hardness, and basically, for whatever reason, it might have been because this was just beat up and tumbled as it came out down the river. Anyway, the butt piece kind of fell apart. So there's the first cut after the butt. You know, so pretty and pretty crumbly. So there's some hard spots in it around this area up here. I'll look it over at a different time and see what I'm going to do with that. And then here's the third cut. I'm just using some of the oil from this machine over here. So it's starting to get a little more solid. You know, you got some green start to creep in there now, and even some black over here on this side. So you got black here and green here, and then you got this red. You know, that's the side between it. You know, so interesting. And then last but not least, we already know what we're getting into here with Mari. The thing is that I cut, normally it was a big piece, and I wanted to cut the big slabs off, but decided not to do that. In fact, let me show you the end. It's getting really pretty now. Let me get the glare off of it so you can just see that white you see on there is white. Very agatized. Green's starting to come in on the orange, and reds are starting to mix it up in there. So very, very pretty and old school. Really, if anybody's ever been up on that mountain, first of all, you got to find a red vein, which isn't very easy. Then you got to dig down, and it's hard rock mining. You're in there chiseling away. And these pockets of moss sit in between junk rock. And so back in the days of tools and excavators, you know, you can make short work of it. But nowadays, you got to work a lot harder. So anyway, every once in a while, you roll up on these little critters that they've been sitting in someone's yard. You know, that's something they wanted to do. They either didn't have the saw to cut them, or didn't have the didn't want to cut them. But anyway, so it's going to be in pieces. So here's the first piece. That's just a butt. Like I said, mostly what I'm trying to do is I'm going to cut it the same way on both ends and score it up. That way I can cut the face and I can cut some bigger pieces. What? Sucker just will not focus in. We'll do it like this. So there's another piece of that as well. It's caught the edge. And I think that was also part of that first. So you got orange, red, and green. Very, very pretty stuff. So the second starts to get a little bit bigger. Like I said, these are all pieces that I can work really easy. And there's enough agate in between this moss that it's really, really, really going to look nice in jewelry. Look at that. Look at the coloration change just from there to there. So just that much. You can start to see where it starts to come in on this side here, and then it comes across the front here. Anyway, very, very interesting. And last but not least, I broke it. I broke it, or it broke itself. It came off there, but 2 pieces. So that, you can see the bluish, clearish agate that's mixed in there. Very pretty. Like I said, these nice pieces of moss, this is really, you can get, I don't know, probably 6 cabs at least off to each one of them. Oh, this one's 6, and then maybe 3 if you do it right. 2 for sure. 2 big ones. You know, and at $25, $30 a piece, you can make your money back on them really fast. So, and the nice thing is that it's really easy to work with. Actually, I really enjoy working with moss. I just there's you just got to watch what you're getting. You want some agatized. Whatever that mineral is that makes the moss, the minerals that creeps in there, actually is a softer part of the rock. So it on a cross section, it has a tendency to not look like it's polished. So the more agate it has in it, the prettier it gets. So anyway, so down and dirty. Like I said, this is just my stuff. There's a couple different types of saws here. Most everybody, I'll be honest with you, starts off with this guy right here, a tile saw, and that works just fine. It's great for trimming. Like I said, when you get to the point where you want to cut slabs, you want consistent in your cut, you'll move on to something either like this or something like that. I mean, these are big money. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that a 24 is, I just happened to roll in that a few years back for a very, very good price I couldn't walk away from. So anyway, 18s are probably pretty good. I think you can cut just about anything you want to cut with that. And, unless your thing is to try to sell big, huge slabs. But people don't use big slabs like they used to. Used to make a lot of tables and stuff like that. People don't do that much anymore. It's jewelry. They want to carry it around with them. They don't want people to come over their home and look at it. Anyway, we're out of here. A couple of saws, a couple of cuts. What I'll do from now on is maybe we'll grab a few pieces when we do a field trip. And we'll grab a few pieces that we find in the field and cut them, and maybe we'll even take them all the way to end. But anyway, I'm going to blitz here. If you like what you're seeing, tell your friends, subscribe, and I will continue to keep shooting them out. Like I said, we've had some weird weather. It's been raining like crazy today. It's not that we don't live in the north and it doesn't rain here, but usually this time of year it's plenty of just snow. Anyway, gotta go. We'll see you soon. Sandman out.